Okay, welcome back, everyone. Now we are in session 2 of 3. And if you've just joined us this morning, good morning. We are busy with the exam revision for the Introduction to Accounting 1A, or in other words, INAC 5111. Our second two sessions, we are going to be looking at learning unit number 5. And so this is part 1 of learning unit number 5. If you've maybe just joined us, please make sure you've got your textbook ready next to you, some paper, pen, and a calculator so that you can work alongside us. And just to remind you, what makes for good exam preparation, you need to be going through all your textbook examples and questions. And if we say you need to be going through them, we mean you physically have to sit at your desk and write out the answers to the questions in full. And then once you've finished attempting the question yourself, then you can turn there to the back of your textbook and mark your answer against the back of the textbook. But first, you've got to write it out in full. Just a reminder of who's with you here in the online class. It's myself, Ina Frost. And then we've got Salama Parker with us as well today, and she is specifically helping you with any questions. So please, students, be encouraged to use the chat function to be typing out any questions that you have. And we are recording this session, and later today it will be up on YouTube. And on YouTube, sorry, let me just get my laser pointer. You must go to the School of Management Studies channel if you're going to want to watch our recordings later today. The exam then is a 2-hour paper, and it's going to be for 100 marks. Okay, so I'm going to touch a little bit again on Learning Unit 4, even though we have previously revised Learning Unit 4. And the real reason for this is that Learning Units 4 and 5 are actually a unit. And both of these learning units deal with the recording of transactions in the journals as well as the general ledger. Oh, sorry, I just want to get back there. Yes. So learning units 4 and 5 then deals with the recording of cash and credit transactions. And the possible questions that can come out of these two learning units is, 1, are you able to prepare all of your cash and credit journals? 2, can you post these journals to the general ledger? And then 3, are you able to prepare a trial balance? And remember, all of these 3 things you have to be able to do for both the inventory systems. So you need to be able to do that for perpetual inventory, and you need to be able to do that for periodic inventory. In Learning Unit 4 then, we specifically looked at the recording of cash transactions, and if you want to go and revise it again later, we're talking pages 107 to 138 of your textbook. And the learning unit outcomes, just to remind you again, for learning unit 4 was to know your theory. You have to be able to prepare all 3 of the cash journals. So in other words, a cash book receipts, a cash book payments, and don't forget about your petty cash journal as well. You need to be able to post those 3 journals to the general ledger and be able to do a trial balance. If you need some more detailed revision on Learning Unit 4, then please go to our YouTube channel and go and look specifically for this recording here. So it is the 2026 Test 2 Revision Learning Unit 4. So please go and re-watch this recording then if you need some more detailed revision on Learning Unit 4. And don't forget, there are also videos on Learning Unit 1, Learning Unit 2, and Learning Unit 3. So if you do need a refresh on any of those previous learning units, please make sure you visit our School of Management Studies YouTube channel so that you can go and watch all of the recordings on our playlist. And then also don't forget that if you do need more support on those first 3 learning units, there's also the catch-up videos available for you with the revision on learning units 1, 2, and 3. In terms of Learning Unit 4, then, I will strongly suggest that you do example 4.1. That covers the cash journals. Example 4.2 is how to post them to the general ledger. And example 4.3 is the trial balance. And then example 5.1 also includes your 3 cash journals. So please make sure you've practiced all of these so that you can do Learning Unit 4 questions. But now we are going to move on to Learning Unit 5, and our focus is now going to be specifically on credit transactions and sundry transactions. In your textbook, I'm now on pages 139 to 171 of your textbook. As always, let's begin with our module outline and let's see what is expected of us in Learning Unit number 5. I think we can actually expect this now. The first thing they tell us they expect of us to know in Learning Unit 5 is know your theory. Then they want to make sure you can do a debtors and debtors allowances journal, creditors and creditors allowances journal. You need to know how to do a general journal. And then there are that example 5.1 in Learning Unit 5 that covers all of the journals. You need to be able to post your journals to the general ledger, and you have to be able to do a trial balance. And lastly, you should be able to do an accounting equation question based on both cash and credit transactions. And not to forget Learning Unit number 3. Remember, Learning Unit number 3 also fits into Learning Units 4 and 5. So you have to remember how to do your VAT calculations, how to do your markup calculations. You have to remember, is this particular item zero rated? Is it non-allowable? Is it exempt? So you can never do a Learning Unit 4 or 5 question without also including your Learning Unit 3 knowledge. And as I said earlier, if you need some revision on Learning Unit 3, please go back either to the catch-up videos or to our YouTube playlist for more revision on Learning Unit 3. Right, so which ones now are our credit journals? So the first one is your creditor's journal, and that's where we're going to record all credit purchases. Then our creditors allowances journal, that's where we return items to the original supplier. Our debtors journal is for the credit sale, but only the credit sale of trading inventory. The debtors allowances journal, that's where your debtor returns inventory back to you. And then lastly, we have the general journal for our sundry transactions. At the start of Learning Unit 4, there is this table that's up on your screen now. And this table can be found on pages 108 and 109 if you want to quickly turn there now so you can look at it with me. This is pages 108 and 109 of the 2026 version of the textbook. Otherwise, if you've got a different version of the textbook, just look for the first page of Learning Unit number 4. So this table is such an excellent summary because it gives you all the journals, the correct abbreviation for all the journals, what type of transaction you must record in the journal, and also the source document that is matched up with each of these journals. So please make sure you include this page as part of your revision for the upcoming exam. The first journal that we're going to look at today is our creditor's journal. And if you want to follow alongside with me, you can go to pages 142 to 144 of your textbook, where we discuss the creditors and creditors allowances journals. So what do we record now in this journal? Remember, a journal is a place for detail. So you can see there are lots and lots of columns in this journal, because this is where we're interested in all the detail surrounding a transaction. So besides putting in the document number and the day of the transaction, the next thing we're going to write down is the details. And what kind of details am I looking for in this first column? I'm looking for the specific name of the creditor. So I'm looking for the name either of the business or of the person that is the creditor. The folio column here, this one we normally ignore when we prepare our creditor's journal. The next one, you see there's another details, and this time around there's a details on this side of the creditor's journal. Now, how do the details here differ from the details over here? So in this second details, I'm looking for the name of a general ledger account. Okay, so in the first details, I'm looking for the name of the creditor. And in the second details, I'm looking for general ledger account names. In the creditors control column, I'm going to write down the amount, and it's going to be the amount of the full purchase price, including VAT. In the trading inventory column, as well as the sundry amount column, I'm going to include the amount excluding any VAT. And in my input VAT column, that's where I'm going to be recording the 15% VAT. If the business was making use of the periodic inventory system, then the name of this column will be changed to purchases. In my creditors allowances column, the information is going to be the same, except that this column's name is going to change to purchases returns if the business is using periodic inventory. Let's go and have a look again at one of our past paper questions. So this is our 2024 exam, and in this question they asked the student to prepare a number of journals. So you can see the cash book payments and the petty cash journals. Those are the ones from Learning Unit 4, and then the creditors journal is the one from Learning Unit 5, and that's the one that we will now focus on in this video. So our next exam tip, remember in my previous video, we spoke about the importance of showing your workings. Now, the next important exam tip is that you have to make sure that you are managing your time in the exam paper. We said you've got 2 hours to earn 100 marks. That means that in every 1.2 minutes, you should be earning 1 mark. So when you begin a question, you should take the amount of marks allocated to the question, multiply it by 1.2, and that will then tell you how long have you got to work on this particular question. So for us, we have to then prepare this creditor's journal within roughly 7 minutes. Please don't spend more time on the question, because then that's going to mean you're either going to have to rush when you do the petty cash journal, or you won't have time even to try this journal. So you have to be strict with yourself in the exam paper, not to exceed the time allocated to each question. The next exam tip is to make sure that you are reading all of the information and the required with care. Because remember, we're only going to give you marks for what we're asking of you to do in the question. So let's see now, in just this small one sentence, how much important information is contained in that small sentence. The first bit of important information is which inventory system is being used in the question. because we've now established that our accounting entries is going to look different for the two inventory systems. So for this question, then they're telling us we're using perpetual inventory. Then the second key bit of information that they give is the markup or formula that's being used. So in this question, we're using a gross margin of 30%. And that, of course, is also key information, because if we're using a perpetual inventory system, it means we have to work out the cost of sale after every sale or sales return. And to be able to do that, we need this bit of information. Then the next bit of information they tell us is we can actually ignore VAT in this question, because the business is not a registered VAT vendor. So just in those two short sentences, there's three very important bits of information that will impact how you proceed with answering the question. So please don't be in such a rush that you don't take enough time to read all the information, and what is actually being required of you in this question. So just to recap then, when you start a question, make sure you check which inventory system is being used. And once you've checked that, you need to see, are they using a markup or are they using a gross margin in the particular question, especially if it's perpetual inventory. This we're going to check for the question, the overall question, and then actually per individual entry or per each transaction, you've got to check, is the amount already including VAT, or are they giving me the amount excluding VAT, or is this particular item zero rated, exempt, or non-allowable? And this side of the slide, you have to check for every transaction, because we can mix up these in a particular question. Now let's go back to that 2024 exam question. So this is the question then that was given to the student. So the student was given a number of transactions that took place during the month. Because remember, again, a journal is prepared per month. So these transactions then happened onto different days during that particular month. And in the question, they asked us to prepare 3 journals: cash book payments, creditors journal, as well as the petty cash journal. So our job is now to go through all of these transactions and make sure we know which transaction must be recorded into which journal. And which page is going to help us with that? Can you remember? That is this page 108 and 109 of your textbook. This is the page that's going to tell us what type of transaction gets matched up with each journal. So please, again, if you haven't taken note of this before, make sure that you do know pages 108 and 109 of your textbook. So let's go through these transactions and see if we're able to match them up with the right journal. So on the first, we have a credit purchase. So a credit purchase then will be recorded in the creditor's journal. Next up, we have a cash withdrawal. So a cash withdrawal then, cash book payments. On the 10th, we make a payment via EFT. Immediately we know that is cash book payments. We buy some printing paper and we take money from our petty cash. So that will be petty cash journal. We make a second payment from petty cash on the 21st, petty cash journal. We receive our bank statement and we see that we've got some transaction fees. That is cash book payments. But they were a little bit sneaky in this question. They also included a cash book receipts transaction. in here. So don't be caught out. Sometimes we do include transactions that's actually not for that particular journal. Next up was another petty cash journal and another one for our creditors journal. So we're just going to focus today on these two entries. You can go and practice the other journals at home in your own time. Okay, so we said creditors journal, that's for all credit purchases of inventory or anything else. So here will be our credit purchases of inventory, and there will be for other credit purchases. And remember, in this question, they said we could ignore VAT. So we are not going to have entries in our input VAT column. Okay, so, oops, sorry. Oh, sorry, guys. I think I went a little bit too quickly. So let's see then, how are we going to record these two credit purchases in our creditors journal, assuming there's no VAT? Okay, so this is what the two entries are going to look like. We have our document number, the day of the transaction, the name of the creditor, and because there was no VAT in this question, your creditors control and inventory columns has got just the same amount. But let's rather look at what this question is going to look like if we assume that Morning Bean is actually registered for VAT. So let's look at what will we do now if they were registered for VAT. Now you can see the transaction here looks a little bit different. Now the trading inventory amount is going to be the amount excluding VAT, and we will now have input VAT. The same with the entry on the 28th. Again, trading inventory will be the amount excluding VAT, and now we will have input VAT. So remember again, your creditors control column is always the amount including VAT. Your trading inventory or sundry amounts are the amounts excluding VAT. So I'm going to divide by 1.15. And my input VAT, that is your 15%. And I'm going to subtract the amount excluding VAT from the amount including VAT. You can also, oops, sorry, I've gone too quick. You can also remember to use this formula of what you want over what you have. We discuss this formula in more detail in our Learning Unit 3 video or our Learning Unit 3 catch-up video. So please refer back to those for your VAT calculations. In Learning Unit 3, we often let you do calculations like this, where you had to complete a table like this, where you had to calculate amounts excluding VAT, VAT, and including VAT. And the reason we asked you to practice tables like this was to prepare you for journals like the Creditors Journal. And to show you that is the amount including VAT. That is the amount that's going to be in your creditors column. So that is the 115, the amount including VAT. The amount excluding VAT, that's the amount that sits in your inventory and sundry amounts columns. And then, of course, the 15% VAT, that is the amount that you're going to put in your input VAT column. Just a quick reminder in terms of your VAT calculations. Remember again, your 15% VAT is always calculated on the amount excluding VAT. You can't calculate either your input or output VAT on the amount including VAT, because you can see here it gives me a very different answer if I use the amount including VAT than when I use the amount excluding VAT. So please remember, if you're going to use your 15%, to make sure you are using the amount excluding VAT. Right, so now we have written up our creditors journal. And we're back now to the one excluding VAT as per the original question. And now the second question they asked the student is they said, how much do we now owe Beans Limited? And how much will we pay Beans Limited if they also give us 2.5% settlement discount? And they asked us to say which accounts will be debited and credited. So how much do we owe Beans Limited? So we owe them these two amounts here added together. That's what we owe them. And they said they're going to give this 2.5% settlement discount. And you remember earlier today when we were in Learning Unit 6, we already spoke about the accounting entries for settlement discounts. And at that time, I said we will talk about the difference between a settlement discount and a trade discount. And it's important for you to know the difference. And this is for both the purchase or the sale of inventory. So let's just look through it. So a settlement discount is a discount that we will give our debtors to encourage them to settle their outstanding balances sooner. So Mr. Beans Limited is offering us 2.5% discount if we will quickly pay the outstanding balance that we owe Beans Limited. A trade discount, on the other hand, this is a discount we offer our customers to buy more of our product. So there is a difference between a settlement discount and a trade discount. And there's also a difference in how we record the two discounts. Settlement discounts are recorded in the books of the business, where a trade discount is not recorded in the books of the business. So what does the entry look like for a settlement discount? Okay, so for a settlement discount received, these we've looked at in Learning Unit number 6. That's where we're going to credit either the inventory or the purchases. Where on the other hand, for the trade discount, remember we said we are not recording the trade discount in our records. And for the trade discount, then we record either the selling price or the purchase price net of the trade discount. That means we're going to subtract the trade discount and then only use that smaller amount when we record the sale or the discount. So I think I'm going to just pause for a minute on the slide just to give you an opportunity to quickly read through it again and to make sure you know the difference in the two discounts, because there's also a difference in how we record the two discounts. And in your textbook, there's also question 5.2, where they also discuss the differences in the discount. So I'm going to give you a quick minute to just read through this. Okay, has everyone had a chance now to read through this? Read through these, let me just minimize that, read through these two slides, and you know now what is the difference between your settlement discounts and your trade discounts. So now let's go back to our question. Let me just see. Oh, goodness. Now my slides don't want to move on. Just give me a seckie, students. Let's just get back here. There we go. Now the slides are moving again. Right. Okay. So remember now in this question then, the question said we had to now say in which accounts we were going to now record that settlement discount. But before we could do so, we just need to calculate the settlement discount. And remember again, you're showing us your workings. So you're going to be always showing us the workings. So we said these are the two amounts that we owe Beans Limited. And we're going to subtract that 2.5% discount. So we're going to pay Beans Limited 7,137 rands. That will be recorded in cash book payments. And the settlement discount is 183 rands. And that will be recorded in your general journal. And as we've said, make sure that you are showing us your calculations. Sorry, I'll move on to the next slide in a minute. I just want to make sure everything is good. Right. Okay. So this is then our creditors journal where we record the purchase of all inventory or anything we buy on credit. And we remember that we're going to put the name of the creditor in this first column, and in the second details, we are going to put the name of the general ledger account. So this second columns over here, these sundry columns, they come into use when we're buying other items on credit. Because remember again, your creditors journal is all credit purchases. So if we buy inventory, we have its very own column for that. But if we buy anything else on credit, then we have to use these sundry columns. And we said that this second details over here is for general ledger account names. And I just want to remind you again quickly, where do we find these general ledger account names again? These account names are the ones we give you on example 2.10 in your chart of accounts. When we covered the previous videos, we spoke quite a bit about this example 2.10. And this example is still very, very important for your exam revision, because in this table then, we give you all the different general ledger account names. And again, we tell you whether they're assets or are they expenses or income or non-current liabilities. So please don't forget to keep this page in mind when you do your exam revision. And it's important for your other learning units, but we can also test you on that chart of accounts just on its own. So here in the 2025 exam, here we actually had a question, a standalone question on that example 2.10. And it's also, again, just to stress the importance of knowing your theory when you come into the exam. Here in 2024, there was another theory question that also looked again at that learning unit 2. And while we're talking about this, I just quickly want to remind you as well that when we talk about the conceptual framework or IFRS definition, that we are looking for that learning unit 2 definition. We're looking for something very specific. And you have to look out in the question, are we asking you for the IFRS definition, or are we asking you for a definition in your own words? Because that will differ in what you give us. So that was just a quick reminder then of the importance of theory in exam papers. But to bring us back to our creditors journal, now we've recorded the creditors journal. So the next thing we need to know is how to post this journal into the general ledger. So at the end of the month, when you finish preparing your journals, you'll remember per the bookkeeping cycle, the next step is now posting them into the general ledger. And to do that, we create one double entry out of everything in this journal. And the double entry looks like this. We're going to credit the creditor's control account. We're going to debit the trading inventory account. We're going to debit the input VAT account, and we will debit the equipment account. So that is what our double entry is going to look like. So let's look at it in our general ledger. So we credit the creditor's control, we debit input VAT, we debit trading inventory, and we debit, also I'll get back to this now, we're going to debit the equipment account. For our entries in the creditor's control, the input VAT, and the trading inventory, we're going to use the journal total. Okay, can you all see that? We're not using the individual transactions, but we're using the journal total. But for the sundry accounts, there we will use the individual amount that must be posted to that sundry account. And you'll see that my total credits is 143,750. And if I add up my debits, it also gives me 143,750. Because this is a double entry, meaning that my total debits must equal my total credits. Because remember, in terms of our golden rule of accounting, it says that we must have a debit for every credit. If you want to revise your creditor's journal some more, you can look at example 5.1 and question 5.7, as well as revision question number 7. All of these will give you more opportunities to practice your creditor's journal and your creditor's allowances journal. Saloma, anything you want to add for our students at this point?
Hi, Ina. Yes, maybe just something very important. I know you mentioned the double entry rule, but also not to forget from learning unit 2, the dead click rules when we are posting to the general ledger. So just remember to always debit expenses, assets, drawings, because students, sometimes they forget, they're not sure on which side to record the transactions. So if they could just remember the dead click rules when posting to the T accounts, and I've also posted again the exam tip. Please, very important to show all your calculations if you want to be awarded full marks. Okay, so we need you to show those calculations, manage your time, very important, and read all the information and the required with care before you attempt the question, because again, we don't want you to provide us information that is not required. So it's very, very important that you first read, especially in now also when it comes to the general journal. I think you're going to mention that, I suppose, when we're going to practice that with the journal narrations, because I always tell the students, just read the instructions, that if they tell you to ignore the narrations, it means you should not record it in the journal. So it's very important to read all the information and only do what is required. Thank you, Ina.
Okay, great. Thanks, Saloma. Saloma was just telling us about using dead click, and in my next slide we're going to just show you again exactly what do we mean when we talk about dead click. So when we prepare a creditor's control account now in the general ledger, as Saloma said, we are going to use our dead click rules, and for a liability like a creditor's control, we specifically use click. And when we do any general ledger account, we can always apply our 3 steps. And step number 1 says, make sure you put your opening balance in first. And how do I know on which side is the opening balance going to go? That's now when I'm going to use this dead click rules of mine to determine, do I put it on the debit side or on the credit side? And your opening balances are normally given to you in the question. So these are easy marks for you to earn in any exam question. The only thing you need to remember is, does this opening balance go on the debit or the credit side? And then you just put that balance in, and that's an easy first mark to earn. But let's just go a step back now and talk about our dead click rule. So what does it stand for? So dead stands for, we're going to debit expenses, assets, and drawings. And we're going to credit liabilities, income, and capital. So that's why for our creditors control, we said we're going to use click because it's one of our liabilities. So with other words, if I say debit, or so if I say I'm going to debit, it means that's where the opening balance is going to go. And on this side, for liabilities, income, and capital, if I say credit, I mean that's where I'm going to place the opening balance. So that's why in that creditors control account, I place the opening balance on the credit side. And I just want to bring you once again back to this example 2.10 in your textbook. Because earlier I said this page was so important to help you know the correct names of the general ledger accounts. But this page is equally important to help you know if it's assets or is it liabilities, is it income, or is it an expense. Because if you don't know this allocation, then you won't be able to use our dead click. Because if you don't know that account is an asset or a liability or income, then you also won't be able to know whether you need to debit or credit that particular account. So please, students, we can just urge you again to make sure you know this example 2.10 in your textbook. So step number 1 now for the creditors control account was put in the opening balance. Now step number 2 now we have to take our journals and post them to the general ledger. And remember earlier we said we're going to take the journal totals to post them to the general ledger. So we've got 3 journals here. We've got a creditors journal, creditors allowances journal, and cash book payments. And we want to post all 3 journals to the creditors control account in the general ledger. So which of all of these numbers are we going to be interested in now? We're only interested in columns with the word creditors control at the top, because we're busy with the creditors control account. So we're not interested now in input VAT or trading inventory or anything else. We're only interested in our creditors control amounts. So from our creditors journal then, that is all our credit purchases that we've made in the month. And this is going to increase our creditors control account. So we're still using our dead click. So with other words, we've got to credit the creditors control account to show that increase. Then our creditors allowances journal, that is the items returned to the suppliers, and those are going to decrease the creditors control account. So that means we have to debit the creditors control account. And lastly, the cash book payments. Those are the payments we've made to our suppliers. It's also going to decrease the creditors control account. So that's going to be another debit. Let's see what it looks like in the general ledger. So here is our general ledger account for our creditors control. We've determined now the increases is on the credit side. The decreases is on the opposite side. So that's on the debit side. So here is my creditors journal. Here is my creditors allowances journal and my cash book payments. To just make sure we all remember that, what do we write under details? Under details, we're looking for the name of the general ledger account where the contra entry will be sitting. So with other words, where's the other side of this entry? Under folio, we're looking for the abbreviation of the journal where you found the entry. And please don't leave out your folios. Folios is another way to get easy marks in an assessment. And we get so sad when students just leave the whole folio column blank and, in other words, are just throwing away good marks. And your amount, remember, that is going to be the total from the journal, except for your general journal or for your sundry amounts. So in terms of dead click, then we said the opening balances is on the debit side or the credit side for liabilities, and it is the opening balance and the increase. So the opening balance and the increase on a particular account is always on the same side. And any decreases in the account then goes to the opposite side. And you can see it here in our creditors control. All the increases and the opening balance was on the credit side, and the decreases was all here showing on the debit side. Now, the third and last step in any general ledger account is to balance the account at the end of the month. How do we balance an account again? We look at the account, we see which of the two sides is bigger. Is it the debit side or is it the credit side? We can see in this instance, it's our credit side. So we add together the opening balance and our purchases, and that gives us our total. We take our total and we also write it down on the opposite side. Okay, so you can see my two totals are now in the same line, and it is the total of my credit side. Then I subtract from it the smaller side, which is the debit side in this example, and that then gives us the balance carried down. So the balance carried down is the difference between your bigger side and your smaller side. And then the last thing I do is I take this balance to the opposite side of the account, where it then becomes the opening balance for the next month. So this balance here on the first is then the opening balance for the next month of the financial year. And don't forget to bring the balance down as well, because that is another way of getting easy marks that you certainly don't want to be losing out in your exam. So to recap then, for our creditors control, we used CLICK because a creditors control account is a liability, and a liability account must have a credit balance. If you need more help on how to balance your any general ledger account, you can refer back to your textbook and you can look at section 4.4.2 of Learning Unit 4 of your textbook. Salama, anything you want to add for our students at this point?
Hi, Ina. Yes, just very important again. I think I had one question from one of the students. He rent amounts, and I just provided feedback in that yes, but that will be more applicable to cash book receipts and cash book payments, rent received and rent expense. And I told him, yeah, so that is just the feedback I gave there. But very important again, students, is when we are posting tip that I would give you, Ina, is you could just go back to your previous slide, is to actually write your dead click rules. And if you know it's a liability account, then you put your plus on the credit side and your minus on the debit side. And very important for you again to understand the transaction and the impact that is having on this account and what you are calculating at the end. Okay, and as Ina has mentioned there also, whatever we are recording on the credit side is increasing the balance of our creditors. So when we purchase on credit, our balance is going to increase. What are the transactions that will decrease the balance of our creditors is when we have returns, and of course also when we make payments. Okay, so once you actually understand the transactions and the impact it has, then you will be able to apply those double entry rules. Okay, so very, very important for you just to remember your debt click rules and to understand the double entry. Thank you, Ina.
Apologies, students, for a minute there. I seem to have lost my slides. So I'm just finding my slides again just to get that for us. Sorry, I don't know what. I must have had some finger trouble here. Salama, please, can you just confirm that you can see the slides again?
Okay, at the moment, there we go. Yes, that's
Okay.
fine.
Sorry about that,
and
students.
no problem.
Thanks, Salama, for sharing that with us. Students, I know we're coming up to 12 o'clock. I want us just to carry on with the Data's Journal. I will give us another break just now. Before I have got another break for us scheduled, but I just want to complete the Data's Journal before we go into our next break. So the next one then, as I said, is the Data's. Sorry, Salama.
Okay, I was actually going to tell you to let them post what transactions will go, but now you've already given
Oh,
the
I was too
answer. Not
quick.
a
Too
problem.
quick. Then for your Data's Journal, we're specifically looking now for the credit sale of inventory. That's what we're going to record. And if you want to follow alongside me again in your textbook, you can turn to page 144 and up to 146, where we deal with the Data's and the Data's Allowances Journal. So again, just let's have a look. What do we have to put into all of these columns? So for the first details here, I'm looking for names of debtors. Then your debtors control column is going to be the one including the VAT. Your sales column there is the amount excluding VAT. And then your output VAT will be your 15% VAT. And remember, that's going to be the difference between the amount including and excluding VAT. Then we'll have this cost of sales column here. If the business is using the perpetual inventory system, that's when we're going to have a cost of sales column here. And your cost of sales is always your profit. It is your sales excluding the profit and excluding any VAT. For your Debtors Allowances Journal, we'll just change the name of this column from sales to sales returns. So here is a completed Debtors Journal. And this is kind of your typical transactions. So we've had 2 credit sales in this example, and we recorded it in our Debtors Journal. The one I want us to look at specifically is that second entry. So it's this one here. And here's the description. So we had a credit sale of 90,000 rands, and we gave a trade discount of 10% on this particular sale, and we use a 25% markup. Remember a little bit earlier, we were talking about trade discounts versus settlement discounts. And we said when we have a trade discount, we always use the amount net of the discount. So you can see here, when I recorded it, I did not record the 90,000. I recorded the 81,000, which is the 90,000 minus that 10% trade discount. So this one then is a good example of a trade discount, and to show you, we record the amount minus the trade discount. But when it comes over here to how we calculate the cost of sale, here we have to be a little bit careful. So remember, they said we have to assume a 25% markup before any discounts. And just to remind you again, the relationship is going to look like this. If we're working with a markup, the cost price is 100, the profit is 25%, and the selling price is 125. So if I want to work out the cost of sale, I need to go back to the price before the discount. Okay, so you can see here I'm using the 90,000 rands, which is the credit sale before the discount. But over here, in my debtors control column, I'm using the 81,000, which is the amount after the discount. So just make sure you note that. That's quite important when we deal with our debtors. And the same thing will apply for a cash sale. So it will work exactly the same for a cash sale. So again, we need to post this debtors journal into the general ledger. What will the double entry look like? So this time around, we're going to debit the debtors control account because a debtor is an asset and an asset increases on the debit side. We're going to credit the output VAT and the sales because sales is income and income increases on the credit side. It's still a double entry because my total debits are equal to my total credits. And again, I'm using the totals. If I can just go back here, I'm using the journal totals, not the individual entries. If you want to do more revision on your debtors and debtors allowances journal, again, there's example 5.1. But there's also question 6.7 that will give you a debtors and debtors allowances journal. And then in those revision questions, there's revision question number 10. And once you've practiced the questions, then you can go back to the back of your textbook and you can go and mark your answer against the ones provided. Let's just go back to our debtors control account now and just slowly go through how do we prepare a debtors control account. So we've established now a debtor is an asset. And so if it's an asset, we use the dead of the dead click, which means opening balances and increases will go on the debit side, decreases will go on the credit side. And I wonder if you can now remember what are the 3 steps we always follow when we do a general ledger account. Step number 1 is make sure you've recorded your opening balance. And how did I know where to record the opening balance? I used my dead click rule that tells me assets increase on the debit side. Step number 2 says, now it's time to post the journal totals to the general ledger. And again, for our example, I've got 3 journals here, a debtors journal, debtors allowances journal, cash book receipts. How will I know which of all of these many numbers here goes to the debtors journal, or rather the debtors control account? Remember again, I'm going to read through all of my little headings and I'm going to try and spot all the headings with the word debtors control. So there's 3 amounts that needs to be posted to the general ledger. So our debtors journal then, that's where we recorded the credit sales, and a credit sale will increase a debtor. So this will be posted to the debit side of the debtors control account. The debtors allowances journal, that's for the sales returns, and that will decrease my debtor. So that will be posted to the credit side of the debtors control account. Cash book receipts, that will be when we receive a payment from a debtor, and that will decrease the amount the debtor owes to us, and therefore it's going to go to the credit side of the debtors control account. So let's have a look now at our debtors control account and have a look at these entries. So here you can see on the debit side then I've got the opening balance and the credit sales. On the credit side, I've got payments received from debtors and sales returns. Remember again, your details must give us the contra account name. So for our credit sales, the other two accounts is sales and output VAT. And don't forget to refer to the VAT as well. Folio is the journal. In which journal did you find this total? And then the amount will be the total except when you're posting from a general journal entry. And then step number 3 says, remember to balance your account at the end of the month. Remember again, step number 1, the opening balance is easy marks, including your folios, easy marks, and properly balancing your account at the end of the month is another way of earning easy marks in any general ledger account. And a last reminder on your debtors control account is a debtor is an asset, meaning we'll use debt, which means the opening balance and the increases must be on the debit side of the account. Again, I'm just going to pause a minute here to give you a chance to read through the debtors control account before I move on. Okay, everyone good with the debtors control account? So when you're in the exam, you should do actually a little test on yourself. So if you were asked to do a debtors control account and all of a sudden your control account has got a credit balance, then that should be like a warning bell for you to say, oh, hang on, maybe I've done something wrong here. Maybe I've put my entries on the wrong side of the account, because a debtors control account must always have a debit balance. Just to show you what was asked in past papers, I just wanted to show you this 2025 exam question. So in this exam question, we gave the students a debtors control account, and then they had to answer a few questions based on the account. So the first thing is they asked the students, will the debtors control account include or exclude VAT? And remember, your debtors and creditors control accounts will always include VAT. And then they asked the student, what type of transaction is the one here on the 10th of May? So they're talking about this one over here. And this transaction then is the settlement discount that was granted to the debtor. So that one is the settlement discount. Let me just see what's the next one. They also asked a little theory question here. They said you must give 2 examples of steps that the business can take if their debtors are late in paying them. So again, they're saying now what happens if the debtor is sitting on 90 or 120 days and they haven't settled their account, what kind of steps can you take? So you can charge interest on their account, or you can start phoning them or sending them emails to remind them to pay. The next one then is this one here. They ask us what type of account is credit losses. So credit losses is an expense account. So we will debit an expense account. And then the last thing they said, offering a credit facility poses certain risks. And that's another little theory question that you can look in your textbook at section 5.1. So you see, we mix theory and application all into one question here in 2025. Then the last thing for both learning units 4 and 5 that you need to know how to do is how to do a trial balance. So a trial balance is that list of all the totals or balances on the general ledger accounts. And you can revise example 4.3 and question 4.8 to practice trial balances. And you can also look at the 2025 exam, question 4.2, where we also tested students on trial balances. Salama, before we go into our next break, is there any last minute things you want to add for our students? Students, we have one, sorry, Salama, before I hand over to you, students, we do have another session because you might have noticed that I did not cover the general journal in my discussion so far. So we do have one more session lined up for you, and that one we're going to dedicate to the general journal, just because that one can sometimes be a little bit problematic. So we've decided to give that one a session all of its own. So please do join us for that session as well. But we will now go into a small break again. But before we do that, Salama, now I'm really handing over to you. Anything else you want to add for our students at this point?
Yes, Ina, can all hear me? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, no, we hear you very well,
Okay,
thanks.
perfect. I did post in chat also on just for them to revise if they want to work through an example for the trial balance, page 162 and page 132. We give a clear breakdown of layout of the trial balance. Please, very important that they should revise the credit journals for the exam now, and especially again show all the calculations. Okay, very, very important, those VAT calculations and to know your VAT categories. So you need to revise Learning Unit 3. We might not do it now in this session today, in this revision session, but as Ina has mentioned, please, if you still don't know how to calculate the exclusive VAT amount and the inclusive VAT amount, because we do somehow or other maybe try to put you out by giving you the exclusive amount, and then you must be able to calculate the inclusive. So please remember those shortcut rules of Learning Unit 3, because all you are actually doing in the journals, as Ina has mentioned, and she gave you a lovely breakdown there, is you are actually repeating those calculations again. But now all you are actually doing is recording them in a specific journal, whether it's a debtors journal, debtors allowance, creditors allowance, and your book journals. And the journal we will be focusing on in the next session is the general journal. So very, very important for you to revise your VAT categories, because you also need to know when not to calculate VAT. Okay, and your chart of accounts, very important, your debt click rules. Please, please, we can't emphasize how important are those debt click rules and your chart of accounts. Okay, good luck, everyone. Thank you, Ina.
Thanks a lot, Salama. So everyone, we will go into a break now. I see it's 12:14, so maybe this time around, I think we all maybe a little bit more tired this time around. So let's do a 10-minute break. So it's 12:14 now. If we can meet all back in class at 12:24, and then we will jump in with the last section on learning unit number 5. In the meantime, if you do have more questions, please feel free to keep posting them for us in the chats. Please remember to sign the register, and then we'll meet back here at 12:24 for our final session.